Welcome back to another Tips and Tricks Thursday. My name is Derek and today I'm going to be showing you my technique on how to install a home button on an iPad. Now this might sound like a small issue, but you wouldn't believe the amount of people that have asked how to do it. Because a lot of the time what you see is the home button falls through, falls in, doesn't click properly. There's a whole slew of issues that arise if the button isn't installed properly. I'm going to show you my way. There are plenty of ways to do it. Let's get into the video. Alright, we're going to be using an iPad Pro 10.5 display. As you can see, this one does come with the plastic bracket installed here that acts as that spacer. And because this is just an example, I'm going to be using a new home button and bracket so you can see how it goes. Now the original buttons, if you remove them properly, you are left with decent adhesive, but sometimes the adhesive on the gasket isn't good enough. That's why it's always important to have replacement gaskets. Some of the digitizers come with an extra bracket and a gasket, some don't, but they can be purchased separately and they're really cheap. So what I'm going to do here is peel off this, revealing the adhesive, and we're going to go ahead and install it. And one of the things we need to make sure we have is that little black nub. We'll square this up, push it on through, and I'm not going to connect it just yet, but we're going to make sure that it's sitting nice and flush on the screen. Now here's where people run into issues. They either try to use some type of liquid adhesive, which you can get away with if you use it and you let it set up, but one of the liquid adhesives that is definitely not recommended, and yet I've seen so many techs use, is super glue. Why not super glue? Well, first, it's messy. It sets up really quickly, so you might not have things perfectly aligned. It also spreads out extremely thin, which means that the gap that you need, that small amount of difference between, say, a double-sided adhesive and it, is so that you may even end up having to bend the bracket a little before install so it doesn't naturally compress the button. And on top of that, it makes this entire section more rigid so that it's more prone to cracking. And it makes it a nightmare for the next tech that will have to remove it, and in doing so, because of the way it is, they may end up damaging the display so that the display can't be refurbished, or they'll damage the button, which means they'll lose Touch ID. So highly recommend using adhesive. Now if you're using the original bracket, you want to scrape away the bracket completely clean, free of all adhesive. And the next thing that you'll want, or the next thing that I recommend, is acetone. Now I just have it here in this little pump bottle, which allows me to quickly and precisely get the amount that I need, because not only will you want to clean up the glass just to make sure that there's no residue from the factory or anything like that from the old adhesive, but when you go to clean this off, you will quickly remove all of the adhesive, leaving it completely bone dry. That versus something like isopropyl alcohol, what happens is, although it will eat through the adhesive and help remove it, in my opinion, you can't get as clean a surface as you can with acetone. It still leaves behind some of the old degraded adhesive, which will then kind of seep into the new adhesive and prevent it from sticking. And alcohol doesn't dry as quickly as acetone, and it's not as good at cleaning, so you really can't use it as well even when getting in here and cleaning. So what I'm going to do is we're going to install this really quickly. Just peel off the protector just like that. Grab a pair of tweezers, hold it right there, and we'll move to installing this. Now we'll get this flex cable. So I'm just going to move that flex cable kind of up and out of the way for a second. Get myself a Q-tip, and we'll get a teeny bit of acetone on there, and we're going to just clean up the spots here where the adhesive is going to go. Grab our bracket, slide it on in. You can already see how well it wants to start to stick. I'll gently set it in place until I can look and find exactly where that nub wants to line up. And we'll line up that little nub with that teeny little disc there making sure that the bracket is aligned, and we'll give it a good firm pinch between our fingers on both sides, and then we can feel nice and distinct click. And we can flip around the flex, slide it on in, click it down. And then the last step is I'm going to take some cold press glue here, and we'll go and apply it around the perimeter of the bracket just like Apple does it. So here I'm going to take the cold press glue, just going to go around the perimeter just like that. We'll go over to the other side and we'll do the exact same thing, just like that. And that way the button isn't going to come off that easily. It's going to be just like an Apple's installed home button, which don't just fall out on their own. I highly recommend doing it this way. And if you are using the original bracket, to use Tessa tape and cut it to basically the exact same shape as the bracket face there. And that way you won't have any troubles installing them. You won't have to adjust the bracket, and you won't have to use something like super glue. And there we go. That is how I install a home button on an iPad screen. Now there are other ways to do this, but please don't use something like super glue. It creates a nightmare for other techs, which could possibly cause them to damage the Touch ID function. Not only that, but it creates that rigid point on the glass where things could possibly break, where everything else has that forgiveness of adhesive. So that's how I recommend it. If you have another way, leave it in the comments below. We'll be excited to see a conversation start below with your tips and tricks on how you would do it. Leave a comment if you'd like to see something in a video, even if it is something simple like this. Thanks a ton for watching. We'll see you in the next video.